Hi YouTube, here we've got this Dell Inspiron 155584 laptop. This is a 15.6 inch 5000 series Inspiron. Just bought it yesterday from Costco for $650 and I think it's a pretty solid deal. Costco does give you a built-in 4-year warranty, so you can get the laptop for the same price from Dell.com, but it's kind of a no-brainer if you got a Costco card to go to Costco because for that same price, for that warranty, definitely a good deal. So I'll go ahead and dive right into first impressions. It's got pretty decent build quality. I mean, it's an Inspiron 5000 series. They also have the 3000 and 7000 series, so it's in the mid-range. You don't get a full metal build, it is all plastic, but as far as plastic goes, it's definitely pretty sturdy. It's not on the flimsy side by any means. The screen doesn't have too much bend to it, especially the actual body itself does seem nice and sturdy. It's not going to, wobble around on you too much. It is designed like a lot of the other Inspiron laptops. It's meant to be kind of like clean, professional looking, but also nice at the same time. And one thing that's pretty cool is that it does have a fingerprint sensor that doubles as a power button. You gotta hold it for a second to turn the laptop on, but when you're logging in you can just go ahead and tap your finger on that and it'll read your fingerprint. The trackpad is pretty solid. I've seen trackpads a lot worse than this, and I've seen trackpads maybe just a little bit better, but it's definitely nothing I can complain about. It does have a little bit of click to it. You press down there, but it's fairly responsive to your finger. I really don't have any complaints there. Though my one complaint is that the backlight could be a little bit better. The lights are a little bit dim, and you can actually see some of the hardware that connects the key to the frame of the laptop behind the backlight. So that when you're in kind of like a lit room like this, the backlight actually makes the keys harder to read because it makes them pretty much the same color as the actual rest of the key. When you're in low light, it probably looks fine, but I think they could have done a little bit of a better job with the backlight, but that's not really too big of a complaint right there. It's not the slimmest laptop, but it's also not the thickest. I think it's perfectly reasonable. I really don't have any complaints about that size. It's still plenty portable, and it's not heavy either. It's definitely fairly light, so it's pretty transportable for what it is. I do like that it has these fan ejection ports back here, where it's got some up here and some under here, because some laptops have one large hinge that goes all the way over here, and so the fan ejection just goes straight into the hinge and doesn't really go anywhere. But with the hinges here and here, you get plenty of good ejection for the CPU fan. And I will say that this laptop runs super quiet. It's not loud at all, especially with that 15-watt CPU. It doesn't make very much heat, doesn't use very much power, and overall it's just, I can barely hear it most of the time. The fans do definitely speed up a little bit. You can definitely hear them when it's under load, when you're doing more heavy stuff. But just idling here, I'm at 1% CPU usage, and I can't even hear the laptop. Because I've used laptops where they just scream like a jet engine, no matter what they're doing. This, thankfully, does not do that. So before I mention specs, I will say, if you want to see other videos like this, and if you enjoy this one, please do throw me a like. I'd greatly appreciate that. If you want to see other videos on building RGB gaming desktops and other Dell laptop reviews and things like that, please do go check out my channel and even consider subscribing. That would help me out a lot. Now, as far as ports go, you do have a fairly small charger port on the side right here. I think it's the same size as the Dell XPS laptop series. I could be wrong about that though. It's smaller than your other Dell laptops like your G3s and things like that. So I can't use my same charger on my laptop, on this laptop, but that's not a big deal. It's got HDMI, a compact Ethernet port, it's going to be gigabit of course, a couple of USB 3s, super speeds, combination headphone and microphone jack port, which is nice to have. And then on the other side, you've got a USB 2.0 and an SD card slot. So other laptops at a higher price point will come with USB-C, which is pretty neat. You'd be able to plug that into like your Dell WD dock that I made a video on for additional displays and things like that. You could also plug in other USB-C devices like Google Pixel earbuds, things like that, which you don't get on this thing, but that's okay for the price point. If you want something like that, you'd probably be more of a professional user. But another benefit of USB-C is that you can usually plug in displays as long as it supports DisplayPort or Thunderbolt, I believe it is actually. But it's not a big deal. You've got this HDMI port which should support like a 4K display, no issue. Which means that ultimately you're only going to be able to plug in one external display to this laptop in total, but chances are you're going to be perfectly okay with that. So it's got a 15.6 inch 1080p display. This particular model is touchscreen. Not all of this model come with the touchscreen display, but it is nice to have here, especially for the price point. And I will say the screen looks fine. There's nothing stellar to it. It's not bad looking. It's not fantastic looking either, I guess, but it looks perfectly fine. I have no complaints about it. Okay, so for specs, it's got an Intel i7-8565U. It's a 4-core, 8-thread CPU. Nothing groundbreaking right there. It is a 1.8 gigahertz base clock speed, which is definitely more on the modest side, but that's good in one way because it doesn't use up very much power, comparatively speaking. But it can also boost all the way up to 4.6 gigahertz, so it has lots of power when you need it to, but it doesn't chew up electricity just idling. That's a 14 nanometer, 15 watt TDP CPU. I know Intel rates their TDPs a little bit low, but at 15 watts, basically what that means is that it doesn't make very much heat and it doesn't consume very much power, which is definitely good, and I've absolutely seen that to be the case using the laptop, which I'll get into in a minute. So it did only come with 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's a 8 gigabyte chip. I had a 4 gigabyte chip lying around for my Dell G3 laptop from a couple months ago that I went ahead and just threw in there, so now it has 12 gigs. It might have caused the RAM to underclock a little bit to 24 megahertz, or excuse me, 2400 megahertz instead of 2666, but I don't think my fiance is going to notice the difference between those two speeds, and it's definitely good to have the extra 4 gigs of RAM. 8 gigs is fine for light use, web browsing, unless you have, 200 Chrome tabs open. It's fine, but 12 gigs would be more preferable, so it doesn't cost very much to buy a little bit of extra RAM to throw it in yourself. And taking the case off the bottom is a little bit of a process. You have a number of screws on the bottom, and there are tabs that snap in the top bit to the bottom bit, which is very common. That's not weird by any means, but you definitely don't want to take it apart more times than you have to, but it's not too big of a deal. If you're going to buy a little bit of extra RAM or another hard disk, you can go ahead and throw that in without too much trouble. It does have a 2.5-inch hard drive bay that you can put a hard disk into, and some of the configurations for similar prices do have a hard disk pre-installed. Taking it apart, I did notice that it actually has a fairly small motherboard, which is kind of cool. I've never seen a motherboard that small. It bodes well to the fact that it probably doesn't have a lot of circuitry and doesn't use up very much power. So it's a very efficient laptop. But the SSD is a 256 gigabyte M.2 Intel Optane SSD, and that thing honestly just flies. I'm super happy with it. I've never seen an SSD be this fast in a consumer grade laptop before. Because it wasn't too long ago that, people would buy a brand new laptop for, let's say, even $1,000, and it would come with a spinning hard drive. And those days are thankfully over, because this SSD absolutely it flies. Doing a speed test here with Crystal Disk Mark, it gets about 1500 megabytes per second read and 600 write. That's pretty stellar. It does use Intel Optane again, which uses caching, so if you were to write a ton of data at once, you wouldn't see these speeds be sustained for very long, but for average use, this is super duper fast. Your typical SATA SSD would maybe do 550, but this does 1500, 600, so it's just blazing. I can even tell you, just using the laptop, it flies. It also comes with Intel UHD Graphics 620, that's pretty modest built-in graphics. Chances are if you're buying this laptop, you're not looking to do a lot of gaming on it, so that's fine. I'm not going to bother with benchmarks. You can probably run Minecraft on it, but you're not going to be able to run any AAA titles, which is perfectly reasonable for this price point. So the battery life is pretty solid. Right now I am on 95%, and it says I have 8 hours and 42 minutes remaining. Usually I don't get quite as good as what Windows tries to predict that you get. I'm willing to bet it gets at least 5 hours or so of light use, which is definitely pretty good. And again, that ties back into the low power consumption CPU. Definitely pretty impressed with the amount of power Intel packed into the CPU without chewing up power. Now here's the charger. It's absolutely tiny. I was not expecting it to be this small, but I definitely enjoy that. The cable that comes with it has a grounding cable built in. Keep that in mind. It's not super long. You can easily get a longer one of these guys though, without too much trouble. But the charger it's tiny, it's portable, definitely pretty great to have. And of course the connector on the end there is pretty small as well. So that's actually about it for this video. If this were a gaming laptop, I'd be doing benchmarks right now, but that's not really necessary. I mean, it's a solid consumer grade laptop. I'm actually super duper impressed by this. It's fast, it's reasonable price point, it's not loud, it's not hot, it's designed well, it's compact, and honestly I'm super happy with it. I would definitely, absolutely recommend this. Again, my only gripe is the backlight not being as good as it could be, but considering that's my only gripe, I think this laptop is pretty solid. So again, if you enjoyed the video, please do throw me a like. Even consider checking out my other videos. I would appreciate that a lot. And thank you for watching.